Welcome to my podcast. I'm here with the Warrior Philosophy, another YouTuber. Actually, do you want to be called by your longer name that you actually use on Substack or not?
Yeah, you can just call me Patrick. For Patrick Saltico. It makes it a little easier than having to
Okay,
say the Warrior
okay,
Philosopher.
yeah. So you know that my channel is mostly about like physics and math stuff. Although there was also always a little bit of philosophy, and lately even more. Now I'm allowing myself to do some rants. You come much more from the philosophically inclined scene, we might
Yeah.
say. So you're not really like a STEM person, I understand. But so actually how I found you is like just a month ago or so. I saw this video where you are talking with this Zoomer woman. This
Yeah.
one interview where you talk about like Blade Runner the whole time and these kind of things. Um, and part of this interview is you talking about your gooner acc take, and this is what I invited you to talk about here. This is, I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's a fairly out there like perspective for the listeners. It is like roughly related to brain rot and an outlook on the future. And before I talk too much, please introduce yourself shortly. And my idea for this interview is like I will talk a little bit about you. I want to understand where you're coming from, and then we can chat a little bit. And afterwards, you give me the long take. But maybe you introduce yourself shortly and really roughly what gooner acc is all about that I want to learn about here.
Yeah, well, I'm 24. I'm currently studying. I'm doing my undergrad right now in college. Before that, I spent 5 years in the military in the United States Marine Corps. So most of my philosophical studies have been on my own, just reading a lot, especially during deployments and whenever I had extra time. And I've only taken one actual academic philosophy class just this semester, but I'm now thinking about actually, hopefully, even doing graduate level studies for philosophy. But in terms of my project, sort of what I'm doing, it started off without a clear direction, but recently I've been wanting to try to cultivate more of a futurist outlook philosophically and sort of addressing a lot of the issues that are going to come up. And I think this is a good segue into gooner accelerationism. And I wrote a very raw, imperfect novel last year, almost a year ago now, where I sort of paint the picture of this dystopic future where everybody or most people are primarily receiving pleasure through simulations, through literal simulations, something approximating what you would see in, for example, Total Recall. So Philip K. Dick is going to be very important to a lot of this stuff because a lot of these movies that I talk about are based obviously on Philip K. Dick's books, whether that's Blade Runner or in this case Total Recall. They're based on Philip K. Dick's work, but it's coming from a science fiction lens, saying, well, what sort of potential future are we going to have, and then what are the ramifications of that? And in this book, I outlined that people will choose to live in a simulation that maximizes pleasure rather than struggle with real life experiences, which of course are twofold of pleasure and pain as sort of an epiphenomena of life experience in general. And then at first that book was written sort of saying, okay, we need to avoid this future, that this future is going to be very detrimental to the human spirit. And now it might be seen as a black pill, but I'm not quite trying to say it's a black pill, but more an opportunity or saving powers that this is probably going to be the future we're going to be ensconced in. It's going to be a future where people choose to live in the simulation because it's going to be cheaper. It's going to give you infinitely more pleasure than you can attain in real life, at least on a sort of surface level. So we're going to gradually see people going from the real to the virtual. And you see this already. People are beginning to delve deeper and deeper into, for example, different types of pornography, which actually engage with the user a lot more, interface with the user. You're going to see a lot more people begin to replace relationships with artificial intelligence chatbots, which don't even have any actual, there's no deeper sentience or consciousness yet, but it's going to mimic that very well. And I think people are already sort of falling for that. And gooner accelerationism is saying, I think your mic's muted. Gooner, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with that outlook. I'm certainly not debating you at all on that. You were just introducing the fact that you have this new term, gooner accelerations, and you made this turn to actually like being a proponent of it. I will actually cite from your article edgy parts in a second. I want just to say that I got into unconditional accelerationism around 2018. That's where I first learned about it. And so for me, an appeal of it is like the general, like, this /X scene has been going on for decades. And when I was so introduced to it, of course, RAC is or was big. There's UAC, which is not as, not political. Is kind of wrong to say that everything's political. But so one thing I find appealing about the whole spiel is that, you see some dystopian future the way you describe it. And any of these accelerationisms are sort of also ways to cope personally with them, because you're analyzing it and you are arguing for something actually having a positive aspect to it, right?
Yes.
And in your case, it will be about this atomization, which is particularly grass, and which I heard this in your interview. I never heard this perspective, which is why I got you on board here. But for me, like one aspect, and maybe you can comment on this, is that I see a lot of negative outlook on AI, from various fronts, but in particular, like from artists or from people who are just too tired, maybe old people who don't want to engage with technology. And I usually am always on more enthusiastic side. Also, I'm pretty much a power user of LLMs in coding and in analyzing stuff. And for me, I want actually to live in a world where there's a lot of crazy things happening. I think this is kind of cool, like born at the right time, where actually something like extreme or cool or like some change might happen. And so this is sort of my accelerationist outlook. Before you go in your how to say your the crazy part of your your take, let me still back up and ask a little bit more questions about you for the viewers to understand. So, did you actually tell me what major you were studying? Maybe I didn't catch that. Is it philosophy?
I'm gonna shift over to double majoring in philosophy, but initially I picked journalism because I thought I could monetize writing. I could monetize my side philosophical hobbies, and then use the journalism to start my own website and media company, that sort of thing. But now I'm seeing that I really need to actually study philosophy too academically. So that's sort of the shift. But I'm still going to major in journalism, but trying to double major now.
I see. Okay, so I agree that maybe you have an edge if you're actually like a real thinker and you actually learn about the history of ideas. This channel is really like math and physics, but a huge component of it is also like just books in general, and talking and thinking about books and how people engage with books and how people learn with books. So I saw you. I mean, I know you had Nick Land on. I listened to that interview a few weeks ago. I have to say, I consider myself in the way that I just described as an accelerationist, in the sense that I actually want a lot of things to happen, and it is a sort of cope. I agree to a lot of the negative parts that come with it, but I'm saying like the only ways through. And I have to say, Land, like he was gone from the internet or from X for a while, and then he popped up. And whenever he's in an interview, basically he has like this two completely different personalities. And on X, he's this super like very rightist guy who talks about like US politics for some reason, despite being British but living in China. But he's only obsessed with US politics. I mean, maybe there's there's a lot of things happening in the US for sure. So there's a point to it. But always in his interview, he's like a teddy bear. He's like the nicest guy.
Yeah.
And they're like, is this the same person who I just saw shit posting and complaining on X? This is weird. And in this teddy bear kind of turn, in this, like, he is probably by himself, he's just a nice, emeritus professor or something. But I feel like he become a little bit soft compared to the thing that people usually like, this 90s stuff,
Yeah.
right? People are like admiring this, this predicting stuff from this Matrix lane, is sort of the thing where this ended, the cyber stuff, and people are in love with this. But now he is like, apart from the plain politics, he's like more like a grandfather kind of person. It feels like he's a lot softer. I admired that in your interview. You were trying to push giving him some ideas and letting him reflect on it. You were talking about eroticism and these kind of things, and he was basically saying, no, I'm an old man, and so this
right.
So I don't want to talk too much, but I want to give like the viewers a little bit of an idea of who you are. I saw these pictures on Instagram. Like, you are like some aesthetics lifter kind of type, right? It's fair to say.
Yeah, I'm trying to get into bodybuilding, so yeah, just lifting to look good, not to be strong.
Yeah, is it that, or that's what I'm saying? Aesthetic from the posing. It looks like it. I don't know. Do you actually want to get into the sport of bodybuilding?
Yeah, I want to try at least once and see if I like it, because I did a lot of mixed martial arts before, but I got hurt in a car accident, so I'm not sure if I can go back to that. So yeah, I kind of just been doing bodybuilding for a little bit. It's fun, and you look, it makes you look good. So it's like, let's try it out, see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I'm all for, like, usually I think like getting lean is the most important thing, like as far as looks go. And I admire it if somebody can do a handstand and like 25 pull-ups. So I recommend it even to the nerds. Actually, from this channel, I was in like some reading groups and in Discords, and I there's always this little bit of tension where there are some people who are like, well, why should I even move physically? Why should I go out? I mean, this is highly connected, of course, to the topic where we're going to get into. But then just more on you. So I have a question. Like, I came up with a bunch of questions for my first guest that I had in last month. And here I came up with this question, which I think is a good question. So what would haters, you think, say about you? Like, how would a hater of you, like somebody who has a good idea of you, but who really likes you or dislikes you for some reason?
Yeah.
Like, what would they say? What would be like a good argument actually from them against you? Like, criticize yourself in this way.
Well, one thing, a lot of people during the Nick Land thing, and I'll push back against this critique, but they said, for example, let Land talk more. I talk too much. But, the thing with my channel is I'm not trying to make it a podcasting channel. I do want to make it a thing where, I can present my ideas to these different thinkers. So it's never going to be like Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan style thing. Like, it is kind of a platform. It's a self-serving platform for me. It's not to be entertainment. It is for myself, right? So it's a little selfish, but I can admit that. And that's why, I'll, for example, talk to Nick Land a lot about my ideas rather than just interviewing him. But that's something people have said about me, and I understand it. Because yeah.
Then I actually disagree with your critics here, because I think, like, usually people, if they're invited to podcasts too often, they end up saying the same thing. And so in this way, you actually brought some new things out of him, right? If you confront the guest with something they hadn't thought about, then maybe you get something out of these people that they didn't think about, and maybe it will actually end up in their later work. And I don't want to use this thing, like the channel, as a platform for myself in particular. I want to meet interesting people, particularly in math and physics. So I would think, hey, I want to interview somebody, but I noticed, like, just as I'm talking, that I'm maybe talking too much, but I want to give a context. I want to stir a little bit the topic in the direction that I think is most interesting for me, that kind of thing that I would like to hear. And then you end up talking so much. So it's really interesting, because it's not that I try to like make my point, but
Yeah,
it happens.
it
Yeah.
happens naturally.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. So feel free actually to interrupt me also if I
for
do
sure.
this. For sure, really. When we wrote on Instagram, you said maybe using faces would help for viewership and so on. And I told you that the viewership, like if you want to do higher math, is so small that it's
Yeah.
not even, unless I pivot to a different kind of content and I want to keep doing math and not just interviews on too broad of a scope, there is not even the possibility to actually make this wide. And so
Hmm.
I think I'm turning it into a virtue in curating it in the right direction. Please.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I agree. I kind of similarly, though I think with my stuff there is definitely interest to it, but sometimes my family, they'll be like, "Why don't you try to talk about more popular stuff, more wide-reaching stuff?"
Okay.
And I say, "Well, I don't really care," because like Nick Land knew about my channel before I ever talked to him. And he told me, he
Okay.
said, "I've been watching your videos, so I'm
Oh,
making
really?
my
Oh.
videos for those kind of people." If Nick Land has seen my videos, right? But maybe most people haven't. I would prefer that Nick Land was attracted to my videos than other people. So I guess what I'm saying is I have a similar outlook as you regarding my content, where I don't want
Mhm.
it to have to appeal to too many people. Now, luckily, I think in my realm, it's a little bit easier than with you, because I know higher math, it's very, very niche. Whereas with this sort of philosophy, I think it's sort of become more popular lately, especially with types like Bronze Age pervert. That was a very big internet phenomenon, and it got a lot of
Yeah.
people into like Nietzsche and a lot of adjacent thinkers. So it's a little bit easier, but I still have a similar thing to you, where I don't want to have to dilute the content I'm putting out to try to appeal to more people. I do want to do it for me, basically. And then by doing it for me, it's going to be what I want, rather than trying to, sort of mold it to fit this expectation.
Yeah, and so it's clear that like you read Nietzsche. I see you quoting Jünger, I think,
Yes.
on your blog as well. So what is the influence there? To talk about some Germans and Austrians, maybe for this Austrian channel here.
Yeah, I think Nietzsche is pretty obvious, but Junger is more. Actually, I think you could apply Junger a lot to this as well. One of the things that Martin Heidegger said about Junger is he wasn't a philosopher, but he engaged very deeply with philosophical ideas. And
Hmm.
there's the Worker, for instance, that Junger writes, and it's very much a techno-futurist work, uh, but from a very different lens than, for example, Land, where Land's is all about decentralization. Junger's The Worker is about sort of this totalizing state, which incorporates every member of society as this self-sacrificing unit, which makes up this greater whole. And Junger's famous quote that I used in my first essay was essentially like, technology is the skin of the Titans. The gods die, but the Titans live. So to speak, a lot of these sort of pre-existent metaphysical concepts that we deal with technology, and even you could apply this to Land, I think, as well. You do return to this sort of titanic, more material sort of outlook. And of course, with Land, what's interesting about his materialism, and in one video I a little bit misappropriated this, but libidinal materialism, uh, sort of possessing an almost spiritual orientation, not literally, but in the sense that there are inherent essences in the Heideggerian sense. There are inherent drives to these things, and they're not necessarily teleological, but they do move in a specific direction. So when we look at technology, of course, Land's thesis would be that technology is decentralizing. It's going from, I think he always says, from the top down to the bottom up. And Junger is again one of these people who sort of one of the first people to look at, well, what does this techno future look like? How is it going to manifest in societies? And I think ultimately the sort of things you say in The Worker is kind of wrong, but it is talking about this almost dehumanization that you get from technology, but then also the potentiality out of this dehumanization to become something more than human, right? But
And
with
is this like when I think Land, I think this is like descriptive and this Titan thing, I didn't really understand. Is this like prescriptive? Is it like saying, oh, this is happening, but we should stir it in this direction? So, or is it also like a theory of how just technology works on the human in general? Like I never read this kind of stuff, so.
It's definitely there's definitely a prescriptive element to it, because what Junger sort of paints out is, like I said, it's the total state where he's incorporating all these different people, and he's taking the archetype of the worker as somebody who's anti-bourgeois, whereas the bourgeois has this sort of individualist mindset to the state serves his interest, not the other way around. The worker becomes the archetype of this self-sacrificing unit within the state seen as a sort of machine. And I think it's meant to illustrate that as technology develops, you need to have this type, right, that is willing to give everything of themselves into the total body, which is the state, and this is future state. So it's a prescriptive of essentially, essentially a total. I guess it would be a little bit. It'd be misappropriation to say that it's a totalitarian regime, but it certainly very much stamps out this sort of Enlightenment individualism into this unit, this body. Of course, with Junger, I think it was in Storm of Steel or something, maybe another book, where he's talking about you line up all these German soldiers with their their helmets gleaming silver together, and that you start to see them as just this one body. It's mesmerizing. Mm-hmm. And he's sort of mesmerized with this totalization, this compression of all these atomized forces into one unit. And with technologies, he's sort of seeing, as technology develops, not only does it drive towards this in his thesis, but also that should be embraced, which I think is like I said, is kind of different, very different from what Land sort of portrays. But even with Land, of course, he's spoken positively about China a lot in the past. I see China as a lot more reflective of what Junger's talking about, where, with technology, it either goes towards, facing the technological future, it either goes towards decentralization, or you need a organ that just regulates everything and is in control of everything, and that totalizes the collective expenditure of technology. That's sort of what China's doing. That's a little bit of a rant without a specific direction.
Yeah, but so I to be honest, I don't know if I understood the Junger view. Is this supposed to be a warning now, or like
at the time he was embracing it? Later on, he's less endorsing of these sort of extreme solutions. Of course, when you get to Humisville, right, and the concept of the anarch is a lot. It's very different from the earlier Junger, but I think what he's advocating early on is stamping out this bourgeois individualism, is stamping out this atomization of individuals within the state. And he wants people to follow this sort of worker soldier archetype, where they're self-sacrificing, where they don't question the sort of direction of the collective group, to subsume them into one effective type of person within the let's say the state, and then to promulgate the power of the state,
okay, but now like coming back to like the goonerism, it seems like nothing worked out in Junger's favor. Then, if the atomization happens and is sheer unstoppable, it seems. By the way, there seems to be scratches from your side on the microphone. I'm not sure if you're touching the microphone or something, but
I might be. Is it still scratching?
It was like a couple of times, like I don't know.
Probably just my chair moving or something.
Yeah, maybe that.
I'll get not too excited.
I actually wanted to more or less start with these quotes, the edgy quotes from your piece, but I will like there's like 3 parts that I will read to you, okay? And then after you can react to that, and then we go into the accelerationist part of your like your reaction to that. And I actually have a few like criticisms and counterpoints, and maybe that helps you also some. So here's a quote. There is great opportunity in this decay, and it is in many ways more humane than the alternatives. What gooner accelerationism can become is a eugenic pruning of humanity. Those who would rather live in the simulation, reducing existence to the utility of predetermined experience of phenomena, are the kinds of people we don't need in the future anyhow. And then later, individuals who live only for the sensation of pleasure do not compose of those who expand the horizon of experience and reality through so and so and so. So we will get to that, but I wonder if that's really like that. You are basically my main criticism of your idea here is it really like this hard cut in the handy practical good people and those we can and which will automatically get pruned off? I'm not sure if that's that easy. Okay, and then there's a third line I want to quote. The Pareto principle has long been surpassed, as it is much more than 80% of the population that serve no purpose for humanity. So I found this, like, let's say, the more outrageous parts of your piece, but I'm happy to hear your defense there. So yes, with this quotes that are already embracing what's happening. I mean, I'm completely on board with you that things are happening. You do not really need to argue for that it's going into a quotes unquote like extreme and quotes unquote bad direction. But so what is your the gooner accelerationism takes? Why do you turn this into an accelerationism, and what do we get from that?
Yeah, well, right away, of course, I am trying to be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to elicit a response a little bit. So I'm going to portray things in a more egregious, sort of fantastical or horrific way, just to get the conversation going. But in regards to, well, is it so simple that you can put people in the box of useful or not useful? If we were not,
well, sorry. Firstly, like maybe again to the audience, like lay out why is it actually positive? Like I don't know if you have fleshed it out yet. Like,
sure,
summarize this point maybe before you go into the defense to what I just said.
Yeah,
the criticisms.
I would say it's useful for, first of all, because to me, if you look at the awareness, the level of awareness of most people today, I don't think reaches the threshold of what I would consider genuinely conscious. I think most people are merely a series of predetermined inputs and outputs where they are completely subsumed into the phenomena and sensation around them. They're just reacting to it. Very few people are actually acting upon what I would nominally consider an independent will. And because of this, I don't think most people are going to be incredibly necessary to the motor of civilizational building, given that the traditional lower caste of society is going to be replaced through automation eventually. It may happen in a long time, but when it does happen, I don't really see the necessity to have most people in society who generally, I would say, in regards to, for example, modern democracy and their voting patterns, certainly does not demonstrate a high level of awareness to me. Most people, if you look at, for example, let's go to voting, for instance, essentially you have the ideas of less than 1% of the population that are, let's say, exported onto the masses. So the masses don't have independent ideas. They're simply parroting or working on behalf of a small part of the population anyway. So most people are irrelevant in terms of the actual directionality of civilizational building. And because of this, and all the resources that they use up and all the space that they take up, I don't see the necessity in having these people be a part of civilizational building, given that their usefulness is going to sort of dissolve as their production is replaced. And the reason why this is a choice is because everybody will have a choice not to choose the simulation. It does not, because I think the big problem today in regards to sort of class conflict is that your class does not determine your value. That's very true. This is something you go back as far as Plato. And in the Republic, there's of course, the allegory with the gold, silver, and bronze, right? So the gold father does not necessarily raise a gold son. He might raise a bronze son. And then the bronze father might raise a gold son. So clearly class, economic status, whatever, they don't determine your value. However, people do have value or they have less value. And when you have the choice to select the simulation, which effectively provides all the stimulation that the average person in society already seeks. Because what are most people doing in their life? They're making enough money so that they can have a comfortable life, so they can have their commodities, so that they can consume. That's what most people's lives are composed of. So those people are going to have all of that in the simulation, just simulated, just dealing with resources that don't actually exist, right? So the sensation of these resources, that's what they're going to have in the simulation. And once you get all these people who are already not contributing substantively to the construction of civilization, the progress of civilization forward, you're going to free up a ton of resources. I brought up the Nome smart city proposal in Saudi Arabia, where only 13 square miles are going to house 9 million people. And with the gooner accelerationism, you don't even need that much space. You could essentially reduce things to this sort of matrix human battery field, which seems very terrible. But within that simulation, they're living, sensationally a good life. Like they're experiencing good sensations, there's good stimulation, whatever. And you compare that to how most people live today in the third world, for instance. The example I gave was the Ugandan farmer, right? Is the Ugandan farmer going to choose to be the Ugandan farmer, or is he going to choose the simulation? He'll choose the simulation. So you free up a lot of resources, you free up a lot of space, and then, especially because I'm a very big critic of how democracy functions, and I don't think that most people vote properly. I think that the marketplace of ideas is incredibly degraded and low quality, and you're going to get all these people out of that marketplace of ideas. So the idea being that by free and independent choice, people who choose the right decision will generally be the right people to have involved in civilizational building. The people who choose the simulation are already the people that aren't contributing substantively to this sort of larger project anyway. So that's the positive, is that you free up resources, the marketplace of ideas, quality rises, because in a democracy, obviously, you and I have the same vote as somebody with far less information, far less intelligence, etc. So that's the advantage, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, you will get a lot of pushback simply because there is this eugenic component, that you greed, that you cut out certain people who are on some metric considered less valuable. I will not, bore you with this sort of criticism that you will get anyway if you keep talking about this. You have to deal with that anyway, and you can ignore it. But then firstly, the question is it like my questions are always all about the line, like, isn't that really true? So, for example, firstly, your hypothesis that it's good because of resources, for example, rules out a lot of like very hopeful optimist technologist perspective that, hey, maybe fusion is just around the corner and we will have so much energy and this will not actually be a restriction, right? And so this even being an issue means you actually think we will keep living in a world where we think about resources, maybe it's materials or whatever, and it's actually important to if we already have to reduce population or like keep population in check in some way, then rather improve it along some dimension. The next criticism you will get is like, oh, this sounds very utilitarian, or you want to improve the culture, can this even be measured, and so on and so forth. I don't necessarily want to go down that route, but I hear that you're saying there is some direction which is definitely positive. This is some innovation and creativity in culture. So what are your ideals here really, and how do these maybe connect with your broader, very philosophy?
Yeah, I think it goes back to eroticism, actually, contra utility. And you brought up utilitarianism. The way that I've been framing utilitarianism is that there is a set limitation of the good, right? What we would consider the good in a society. And utilitarianism is about reaching the threshold of the good. And I'm saying that anyone who lives under that metric of determining the quality of life will have that in the simulation. Whereas, this criticism of okay, well, what is, for example, well, let's take it back a bit. What makes someone useful in the creative sense, in the innovative sense? And I think it's about expanding the parameters of experience. This is something I talked about as well in aesthetic accelerationism, and in an essay I'm working on now as well, where to me, how I define the erotic is that organisms and beings of a higher impulse will mold themselves to they'll mold themselves in a way where they both expand the parameters of experience and they expand their ability to experience those new parameters. With utilitarianism, it's about reaching a threshold. It's about reaching a limited point of, for example, with survival, sustenance, and then beyond that, I consider capitalism, or not necessarily capitalism, but the life that generally you live in a sort of consumer capitalist society as a hyper utilitized form of survival, where all the same sensations are just taken to extremes. So food, right? So just the basic food needed for survival turns into this sort of, obese consumer who's just trying to get as much as possible within that particular sensation, and then goes to shelter, right? And then we look at possessions that people don't really need, but it's all acting upon this initial descriptive impulse of life that is necessary to sustain yourself. And then we go to sex, and that's the most powerful one, right? So porn, to me, is actually a hyper utilitized thing because you're maximizing the amount that you can experience within the limitations of a specific sensation, in this case, sexual pleasure. Porn, to me, is a hyper utilitized thing. It's not breaking out of that descriptive. It's just trying to maximize the experience within that descriptive of life. Whereas to me, the erotic, and this is where creatives and innovators come into play, the erotic is about breaking those thresholds and adding additional parameters of experience. And to do that, you can't just act within the prescribed what or is. You have to go beyond utility. You have to go beyond the descriptive, and you have to, as Bataille would put it, you have to engage in the glorious operation. It's a non-productive force. There's no like teleology that you're trying to reach. There's no absolute in the Hegelian sense that informs this doing. And actually, my next essay is going to contrast Hegel contra eroticism. But essentially what I'm getting at here is, to me, the creators and the innovators, the kind of people I want, are the people that are going to be actively trying to reshape experience to be something unlimited, whereas the kind of person I see today is largely just trying to maximize the amount of sensational pleasure within a specific experience. They're not trying to go beyond that. And so when you say, who are these creators, it's the people that want to expand the parameters of experience beyond the prescribed sensations.
Yeah, so in your essay, I've written down like the positive notions of people that you use are like, you talk about dreamers and warrior nobility. I don't know how this, like, also your YouTube username says warrior philosopher. I don't know how the warrior really pops into that, and why the warrior would be like so central or important vis-a-vis other people. But even if like you would find people who agree, we want to have this expanding experience, expanding folks around, more of them around, and the rest they can go to their pods and not reproduce and die off, and we're just left with the good people, quotes and quotes. Are you even tied then to staying human? Let's talk about the Peter Thiels of the world. Like, if you're already talking about this expansion and going beyond the things that could be on a metric, you're going like fairly mind expanding and exotic and these kind of things. Why does it even, in your view, have to stay limited to the physical body? As we are, do we actually want people with their primitive drives of trying to make babies and trying to like feel the salt and sugar on the tongue, or do you want to actually go beyond that? Are you like a transhumanist then? This sounds like going a little bit in this direction, so I don't know what your take is. So what is this with these warriors, and how do you feel about transhumanism?
Yeah, well, the name of my channel started before I even knew what the hell I was going to really be doing with it, so maybe it's a little bit outdated. But I do think there's something to say about the warrior archetype and its relationship to the artist, because I see both of them as reconfiguring reality intentionally. They don't allow the external forces to completely shape them. They're actively reshaping our experience of reality beyond the descriptive. So I guess that would kind of be how I see it, is that all these things require some level of violence. And by violence, I simply mean the appropriation of energy at the expense of another life form or being. And to do this, you do have to appropriate. I mean, even a vegan is engaging in violence by eating plants. That's still life. Everybody engages in violence to both sustain themselves, and then if they want to go a bit further and they want to go beyond sustenance, then they have to commit acts of violence to gather resources to redistribute towards the glorious operation or towards non-productive forces. But so the warrior, of course, is someone skilled at violence, someone skilled at
okay, so I would actually then summarize it. You say a warrior is a warrior and has a nobility to it because you actually expect it will be necessary that these are people who can accept casualties happening.
That's one side of it, but then it's also just this idea of, for example, even with warriors, right? The traditional conception of the warrior is that warfare is not fought on a material plane, but on a spiritual plane. Of course, I reject that literally, but figuratively. When we think about people engaging with religion or myth building, it is nominalizing reality to encompass a larger parameter of experiences. And it may not be true, but somebody who engages in the construction of religion is saying, okay, well, there's something beyond this, beyond the descriptive. They are engaging in myth building. They're engaging in the erotic. Now, it could be a wrong engagement, so to speak, but it is sort of saying, okay, we're going to nominalize almost existentially that there's something else that's important, the non-productive. So that's what takes you beyond utility. So the warrior does this because, people like to compare the soldier to the warrior. Yes, nobility is important with this because when we think of the soldier, they're working so they make money, so they can, it's just a job. Whereas to me, the warrior is almost like an artist because you're reshaping reality on the premise that there's something more than the descriptive material in front of you. And again, I'm not advocating for some return to traditionalism or whatever, but it's one way to think of how are they different from the soldier, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and now like it's interesting because I have some friends who are also like Zoomer who are really like they're seeing negative things. They don't want to be black pilled, and I would not call them black pilled, but they say like if it's already going down, then let's adopt a very like a hard mindset. And especially like here in Austria and Germany, you have like, if you look back, apart from the Krishna tradition, there is this, do you know like Siegfried Sage? Like, I don't know how it's translated.
Like the Nordic pagan sort of.
These kind of things where you always have the soldiers and they're basically already like embracing the end times. It's a little bit like Valhalla style, like
Ragnarok type things.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of thing, this reminds me a lot of this because you have this sort of like reframing of like violence and fighting and the warrior. But this, this comes close together to the other point that I broached, to which you still can answer regarding these transhumanist things. Going beyond the human and like this is like sort of a transcending. And it gets more and more extreme. I don't know if it's of these times that everybody thinks of the end times, and that everything from here on will be completely different. But yeah, this comes together. So what is your take on this kind of going beyond the human, going beyond life, going beyond the human body as we know it?
Yeah, I believe that's 100% a part of it. The area where I probably stray a little bit from most transhumanists and certainly from early land is in my essay, More Human Than Human, which I'll get into. But you brought up, for example, the sort of Nordic mythology, and I would like to bring in Hesiod's theogony, which is something I quote a lot. And in Hesiod's theogony, we have a clear line from chaos at the beginning, and then you get Gaia, eventually you get the Titans, and eventually you get the gods, and then you get man. But there's this evolution of being over time as something that ought to be overcome. I mean, man in this case is really framed as an improvement of the gods, especially once Prometheus gifts them fire, techne, the ability to mold oneself and to actively reconfigure what you are, to evolve beyond just nature and beyond just the biological. You can actively facilitate your own evolution with technology. And the area where I would say I disagree somewhat with transhumanists is I believe in this concept I'm kind of playing around with as an axis of being. to be in the world, you have to have an access. You have to have a point from which you are in the world. And the problem with a lot of transhumanism is I feel that this access is stripped out. If you can become anything, then you're nothing at all. You have no identity. You're just this floating piece. You're the complete rhizome in the sort of Deleuzian sense. Whereas I think you need an axis from which you can be in the world. So when we think about transhumanism and evolution, there has to be some aspect of your identity that carries on throughout all these evolutions. So even with biological evolution, we can trace our ancestry through primates, which have shared characteristics. So of course, we are as evolved as chimpanzees technically, because of course we have a common ancestor. But then there's this shared aspect of our being that we can trace all the way back. There's this tracing historically. And I think the same thing has to apply to evolution. When we get to land, you get this forgetfulness of being, almost in a Heideggerian sense. You forget your being because in the past he said essentially nothing human makes it out of the near future.
I quote that a lot.
Yeah, like that. Everything's forgotten. There's not even that remembrance that we were once primates. The future inhuman, death drive, machinic decentralization. There's nothing human that lives in that. There's no pathway. So that's a forgetfulness of being. But there's also a forgetfulness of being with transhumanism. Let's say, for example, this is something where I disagree with Jason Georgiani, who has been like a very big help for me. He's helped me with a lot of my essays and stuff, and we talk a lot. But one area I disagree with him, and I had a disagreement with him in one of our podcasts, is he talked about this idea of switching genders in the future in a transhumanist lens. And I see that as a problem, because if you could just choose to go from being a man to a woman, you lose an axis of your experience. A lot of who you are and what you are is shaped by being a man, and that gives you a unique way to interact and dialogue with reality. If you can just go from a man to a woman, for instance, you reach this point of stripping your access, and then you aren't really anything at all. And I think that also applies to what we're sort of bringing up here, becoming more than human. There has to be something of a continuity. The core aspect of our being has to continue in some way, but that doesn't mean, for example, that we can't improve and enhance ourselves. And in More Human Than Human, contra Nick Land's Inhuman Future, that's the subline of that title, is that we have to take all the irrational aspects of humanity, and we have to find a way to enhance them. So the Blade Runner analogy that I make is that the replicants, they still have that base human drive to love and to hate. So you said, for example, should we get rid of the desire to procreate? Well, I don't think so. I think that these desires, if you enhance them irrationally and you vivify them, right? So it's the idea, again, between the utilization of pleasure, right? So now sexual pleasure, it's a threshold, right? You have to take those things as a root, but out of that root, you birth a lot of different experiences, but they do have to be rooted in continuity. Otherwise, you forget what you are, and then you aren't really anything at all. So yes, I am a post-humanist, but also with the caveat of there has to be a continuity. You can't just be anything, because if you're anything, then you're nothing. And I think this is something, last point, since I got on a little bit of a rant, the last thing I'll say is like modern leftism, for instance. You have this sort of androgynous male and female. They sort of reach this point where they're so focused on equality and egalitarianism that, and this is just one view of leftism. I'm actually very partial to a lot of leftist thinkers, specifically, the post-structuralists. But one aspect of deconstructivism and post-structuralism and the modern left is this androgynous figure to be equal with another. They have to get rid of all the distinctions that make them what they are. And that's a fundamentally flawed thing when we consider what are we going to be in the future. If we can be anything, then we're nothing. And that's a problem. So that's my caveat with transhumanism.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for this answer. I understand it better now, combined with what you said before. So if I would summarize it, you say there is something which you want more of. It is this sort of creative capacity. You are opposed to this utilitarianism, and therefore also to the rationalism, which just picks a metric and improves that. You have some aversion to some primitive like desires, and you see them sort of as weak, and you're not opposed to let's have them like let them enjoy their end in their pod. It will not be a loss if they are gone. You're sort of picking what you want. I don't know if like firstly like I think I have a good idea where you get going with this. Like how do you what you value and you don't value. But one thing is that it's fairly complicated and fuzzy to like convey, right? And now we had like 40 minutes and I have an idea. But if you want to argue for it, then you would probably need people who like agree and are in line with what you're saying. And I think there's an appeal, but I don't know if you like. I don't expect now I find a second person who has actually the same view, because it's like it's a very like you're picking various thinkers and you're bringing them together. I would also say like the left-right dichotomy is not super helpful anymore. There's a lot of thinkers I like in both of these camps. I don't really try to be in either of these camps. And you also like I like this point about you basically want attention. You want something human left there to bounce against. You want a sort of a constraint. Otherwise, you are just this like there's a sort of fear that the spirit would become like some floating entity which does not like has no struggle and has no goal. This is like a sort of endpoint that would be not human at all, and you feel sort of this is not you don't really want that. I mean, have you seen Neon Genesis Evangelion?
No, I haven't. Is it good?
I mean, yeah, I would say it's good. I mean, it's not too long. You can watch it, and there's like a lot of crazy ideas. Like, I'm not a big anime kind of guy. I mean, I love Ghost in the Shell, and I really like Lane as well, because it comes from the same time, right? You have also not seen Lane, right?
I've not seen Lane, but I'm familiar with Ghost of the Shell.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell is like is philosophical and it's just 2 hours. Lane, I would take the time and watch it. It's like I think it's like 9 episodes or so. Because it comes from the same time of this 90s land time where you have these thinkers who are observe, or the internet is coming up, and what will this mean for humanity? And both in Lane you have this sort of human mind transcendence. In this case, in the internet, I don't want to spoil too much. It's really like out there, and in Neon Genesis as well. Like it's placed like in the future, and you have. I mean, to spoil it a little bit, you have also this sort of, in the end, human consciousness potentially merging into some blob. Anime fans will not like my description, but there is these ideas of in all of these shows, in all of these 3 examples that we just talked about, these animes, it's all about like the human becoming something else, which is much more ethereal. And you lament that you say you don't really want to have human become completely decoupled. You do not want this base drive human. They can go to the pods, but you also don't want to go into other transhuman extreme. So that's a little bit difficult to handle. You have like your preferences, but this is like a want, and I wondered if. I mean, my point is that maybe technology goes in either of these directions, and you cannot get what you want. So I mean, this is basically an appeal from you. Hey, even if this might be technologically possible, please do not go there. Do not dissolve the human. Don't go transhuman. I'm afraid I have to tell you that there's this trope. If something is possible, the humans will do it. So I'm not sure if you win out in the end.
The question then becomes which will triumph over the other, because. You could see this as my sort of thing is like limiting, maybe you're limiting the will to power of an individual, but I don't think it's the case. I don't think that there's a clear telos of this is going to be stronger than this. So let's say, for example, they can completely break away from the human experience. Maybe they can, but I don't think that necessarily means it's going to be more powerful or stronger, because I don't see my view as something conservative. It's more so, in some ways, it's functional. It's very rational, but also functional at the same time. Because if you do become the rhizome, I mean, just look at the state of Europe. Look at these French intellectuals, right? These French intellectuals that are so concerned with, like you take these post-structuralist thinkers, they're so concerned with intellectualism and breaking free of all these constraints that the country of France has lost its identity entirely, and now it can be subsumed by some peripheral peoples with a stronger identity. This could also apply with the appropriation of technology. Maybe by completely stripping yourself of those axes of being, you're also going to weaken yourself at the same time, because there has to be this idea of us. Because if there's no us and everything is sort of, if everything is everything, then whatever has an it is going to be stronger than those everythings. Whatever has that composition, that bundle, is going to be subsumed the other thing. So I think by retaining some form of an identity that isn't limited traditionally, but is an identity, is a small form of reterritorialization in the Deleuzian sense, I think that it's very possible that, yes, obviously I'm saying I'd prefer that it's just a want, but maybe it also happens to be a better instrument for power as well. And really quick, to go into the whole Junger thing in China, one thing Junger is trying to do with the worker state is, instead of putting everybody in the gooner pods, he's forcing them to do something good. He's like, no, you're going to fit the archetype of somebody useful. So that's another thing you could do as well. It's kind of what China's doing. Instead of, because I'm sort of looking at things where capitalism triumphs, right? But if there was a hegemonic state like China in charge of everything, they could just tell people what to do. And they're kind of already doing that in China now. They're directing people in necessary industries that need more workers. They're saying, you're going to do this with their SOEs, their state-owned enterprises. They don't need to make a profit. The CCP will redirect government funds, right, to essentially say, look, you can take a loss, but this is going to make us strategically stronger in the future if we own the energy grid in like the Philippines, for instance, right? So the same thing is like present in Junger's state, where people are just forced to do things. You're going to do this. You're going to sacrifice for the state. That's also an alternative to gooner accelerationism. You could just tell people what to do. But then the question becomes, if we have robots, what's the point of that? But what I'm getting at here is ultimately the it, call that the Chinese in this instance, right? When you have an us, when you have an axis of being that you are trying to promulgate at the expense of others, maybe that's integral, even in technological advancement. Maybe it's still integral to have an axis of being, to have an it, because if you have no it, then there's no reason to do anything, and there's no thing that you're doing something for. So I guess what I'm getting at is, you could be right, and maybe my thing is just, it's just as relevant as the other thing. But I would argue that maybe there is relevance in this idea of holding some identity, some unifier, and maybe that having some unifier is necessary to promulgate the it around yourself, and maybe they'll be more powerful than that which rejects the it entirely, if that makes sense.
So going back a little, of course, regarding the French people, I think academia and ideology has an influence, but of course, it's not just that. There's a lot of economic reason. There's the position of the Russians, the position of the Americans, if it comes to how the French evolved. In general, I think there are so many forces, technological forces, economical forces, that I personally feel humans are not really good at. The chance that we fuck everything up and we will have just a robot take over. I guess I'm afraid that the chance is quite not small, and I see where you like. I like actually your characterizations of the creative human and how you like split it off from people who are not that. But that this will actually play out in your liking remains to be seen. I think the world is so fragile, and I don't know if we will have a technological takeoff for that to happen. I want to mention just I have two like fun things. Firstly, I know actually people like some architecture postdocs who are part of the design for this Arab line city thing.
Nome City,
all around the world, basically a lot of like university architecture studio or whatever, or like groups are like they get some money and they get involved with this kind of thing. And the funny thing is, I'm pretty sure if you ask like there's like these 3 women that I know them because they were like thinking in the same department of maybe doing something with AI. Maybe I do something with them in the future because I have some expertise in this direction. If you would ask them, they would also say, this is a kind of like odd and weird and probably to some extent horrible. And
but they're engaging in it.
No, they're engaging in it because they are also just like academics, and it's not like they have so many options to choose from. So it's really funny that like it's probably easy to throw your like. I think they don't even actively think about it. They think like, oh, this is really cool. There are some people who want to actually like pay architects to do something new, and it's not all that every day that you can as like an architect like do something creative and do something new. So it's interesting that like there are some morals to that are just overwritten. The other thing is like as a fun fact that you might want to hear that you know the word podcast has like a funny etymology. What is the word? Where the words come from.
Etymology.
Yeah, exactly. So there's like it is. If you go back in the past, it splits up and it ends up with 2 agriculture things. So on the one hand, you have podcasts where you broadcast. It's like a version of broadcast from radio where this is like literally just an analogy to like spreading the seeds. You have to broadcast, you're putting everywhere the seeds, and this was used in radio and then it turned to podcast. But also it's called not broad but pod because of the iPod. And the iPod is actually named, this white, small, nicely designed thing is named. It's named after 2001 Space Odyssey Eva pod. There's this external like space pod where it's like some robot where you can repair things outside. And so they were naming this after this, which is funny because in Neon Genesis Evangelion, it's all about like this, these robots you can sit in. And they are also called Eva, which is, I think, probably a reference to Eva in the Bible. There's a lot of religious themes there
Eva,
as well.
like Eva.
Like Eve, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
Eva
like in Wall-E, it's like that too. You remember Wall-E?
Yeah. And it's also that kind of thing. Yeah, it comes together. And of course, this pod is named after like just pods from plants, from also agriculture. So it's kind of funny how the words evolve there. So, because you're talking about pods a lot in your piece, I was thinking I mentioned it.
Here's one thing about the podcast, right? In the podcast, it brings all these people together who wouldn't otherwise be together, which is a good thing. But at the same time, you're also kind of atomized because instead of going out and meeting people in real life, now you're in these echo chambers. You're getting most podcasts are sloth. We can agree. These are good conversations we're having. But most podcasts are talking about drinking. They're talking about whatever, they're bullshit, right? So you're stuck in this pod, getting your social interaction through the podcast, one-way interaction. So maybe that's another etymology of the word. It's like you're stuck in your own pod in a sense. This is the beginning of the simulation,
Oh, that's interesting. The podcast is where you go in the pod and you're just isolated. Yeah. It's like it's interesting.
Sorry, not to interrupt again. You've read like Fahrenheit 451?
I haven't read it, no, but
sorry.
What's it about? Yeah.
Wrong one. Actually, no. I'm thinking of not Fahrenheit 451. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Right, the Blade Runner book. You read that? You remember
might be. I've read some short stories of Dick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just funny because I think it's in Fahrenheit 451 too. But there's like a TV show, and you have a script to the TV show as a listener, and you know how to respond to the TV show. So it will talk to you, and you read the script. I forget which book it's in, and you read the script back to the TV. So it's like the podcast. Okay. It's like it's simulating human interaction. So you don't need your friends or whatever. You watch the TV, and it's not really related, but it's like something Baudrillard talks about, right? In regards to simulation, is we're going to see life eventually transferred into virtual space, which is happening now. So that's like the beginnings of the simulation and gooner accelerationism, right? So it's like, I guess what I'm getting at is like you have all this convergence, and maybe we should look at the etymology of it, but it kind of makes sense. The pods and
I mean, much has been said about it. This will not go away, so I don't even want to I don't even want to overthink it, because that's what we have here. Like, the only thing that would stop the internet communication would be like a nuclear showdown where we go back, you know,
Sure.
uh,
Mad Max.
Okay, so you said, you warned me that maybe the recording will only be 1
It
hour.
looks good.
We
It's
are
still
always
going. I guess we're good. I thought it was an hour, but maybe they changed it.
okay.
So we can keep
Yeah, I
going.
mean,
Yeah.
there are various things that like I still picked up from your text. So, for example, I don't know if this was a throwaway line, but you were talking about John Connor and his goth girlfriend. What is that? What made you write that?
I was just trying to be funny. The idea was that Eve, essentially, you're either subsumed into the will of the machine, or in this case, he represents a rebellion against the machine. Because obviously John Connor is the leader of the human rebellion. That was more of like a fun little quip. Like he's still fighting. Yeah.
So, but what does the goth girlfriend represent for you? Is this something good or something bad?
Oh, it's good. It's good. It's like a hot, mysterious, dark
The
hair,
hot goth
eyeliner.
chick.
Yeah, well, because I was saying that in relation to the Amish, because the Amish don't engage with technology at all. So whenever technology takes over, the joke was that the Terminator would go and bang the Amish guy's wife because he can't do anything about it, while John Connor, who engages with technology, is fighting back. And then on the flip side, I'm the third position. I'm saying, well, we should be part of the Terminator and sort of, direct it as architects. But yeah, the goth girl thing is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I agree with you, but you're projecting a little bit. I learn more about
absolutely.
you with this.
Now people know what my type of girl is.
Yes, but it's not too French, but
yeah.
Actually, I heard that, like, regarding the Amish, there are some people who say, like, basically they are only always just 30 years behind, basically, right? Because now they are also, like, they're having businesses, they're expanding, as you know, right? They're like, they make some money, they buy land, they can buy land because they have some revenue there, and they have some rules where they say, no, now we can use a computer and we can only use this, and we can have a car, but it has to be black, like a horse, blah blah blah. So I think there's a little bit of a, like, I think the Amish are actually coping. They're seeing the advances, and they're like approaching a little bit. So I think even with them, it's maybe this is a good way. You don't adopt things immediately. You just learn and see what is actually good. What you think a lot more about what you want to adopt. So it's good if you're like giving yourself some time. But eventually they will also like use the technology. There is also like in Vienna, there's this thing where I don't know how much you know about the history of Vienna, but
Not too much.
Austria was of course part of, it was Anschluss in the World War. It was part of the losing team, and then to say it nicely,
sure.
Then like Berlin, it was occupied. It was split up. So you had in parts of Vienna, you have like the Soviet occupation, and then you had everywhere like you had the Stalin hanging, and that's why because there was different powers were like in Vienna, and it was not as destroyed as some other like German cities. You had there was a sort of like freeze on the city, like for various reasons. It was not like rebuilt immediately, and you had old things, and there was like a lot of for many years there was this sort of economical stagnation, and then eventually it picked up again. But basically what I want to say is that Vienna had some time actually to think of what they want to do with the city, and as a result of it, you have in Vienna a lot of like a best of both worlds kind of situation, where you have good infrastructure and you have much better housing in basically all German cities, and certainly like other cities. So there is like an advantage to not like to restraining yourself and not jumping into the technology. On the flip side, of course, as people point out rightly, Europe is far behind now in terms of technology to Silicon Valley, and that's probably quite a bad thing, because we are still going down the consumer route, even if we don't produce our own downfall.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, I would say with that is a balance. Obviously, you don't want to fall behind, but I think the best way is here. The best example of that practically is a lot of these tech elites. It's something I say in a lot of my videos. You probably heard me say it. They don't allow their kids to just use technology from a young age. That's a good example of it. The bad example to me is the Amish, because the Amish are not in control of their own destiny. They're existence exists because America decides that they don't have to serve in the military. They don't have to, they don't have to be a large part of America. America will protect their freedom of religion. They'll protect their communities. If America didn't exist, a couple of, like imagine we go to Mad Max Fury Road. Some Mad Max people are going to go in there, kill all the men, take the women, as wives. That would happen to the Amish if there was no America. So they're not in charge of their own destinies because they're Luddites. So what I'm using here is in my essay is a critique of Ludditism, that if you detach yourself from the game, then the game will eventually subsume you. But yes, I agree with you on the on the side of restraint at times. You have to be careful that both you don't get subsumed because you had no role in technology, but you also make sure that you're not subsumed because you jumped into technology too much. So I think as a consumer, that's especially true. But the problem with limiting, for example, the development of artificial intelligence is sort of what you talked about. If you can imagine it can happen, someone's going to make it happen. There's no way really to regulate this, especially if you look at China. You think China cares about regulation? No, they're just going to do whatever they can get as fast as possible. So it's tough because you have all these forces that are going to, like, any regulation is just going to give someone else an advantage. Same with climate change. Like America tries to do all these climate things, and then China's like, fuck it, we'll do this. I don't give a shit about your climate resolve. So it's like you have to take into consideration when you try to be good, so far as you can assert a good. When you try to be quote unquote good, someone else is going to be bad, and you're going to lose.
Yeah, like with China, I don't even know. Like there are some voices who say that they took over all the German technological developments, and they have like solar power things and so on and so forth. So they have some progress. I can see a world where China is actually working out. They have some demographic problems as well, but maybe it works out technological for them, and maybe they develop some more positive aspects. I think the per capita like pollution of China isn't as bad as like Southeast Asia, like the plastic in the oceans and so on. But of course, there are just so many people, like with the Indians. So even if you have the same pollution per capita, it's just horrible for the environment nonetheless, because there's like 3-4 billions of people there, and in Germany it's only like 80 million.
Right.
Regarding what you said about controlling your own destiny and stuff like that, it's so funny because just yesterday there's a YouTube channel who is like just uploading videos on Metal Gear Solid. Have you ever played it? Or
on what?
Metal Gear Solid.
I know the game. I've never played it though.
Okay. So it's also like Kojima. He's like a god from some people. It also comes from this Asian thinking about future cyber stuff. And Metal Gear Solid, it is like like it's a spy game. You have like these American characters, but it's all about nuclear, as Godzilla is for the Japanese, and it's all about like it gets very high tech, but it's like very about morals and all. It's all about these kind of things. And I also I have only played this first 2 parts when I was a kid. But there is a whole franchise, and one of them is like something with peace, something. So I listened to the video, and I go on my walks. I listen to these things, and the guy who like explains all the lore of Metal Gear Solid, which is also like always like has a philosophical point. There is there's this game which is basically like an economic game. You're basically like, you're building like sort of an army. It's like a Cold War kind of simulator, and it's all about like Japan and the theory of nuclear deterrence. Of you have the nukes, and the argument that we didn't have like a huge major war since the 40s because of the nukes, because nobody wants to attack. And it's all about like the video was all about like Japan in particular, because Japan, I don't know how much you know about like the from the culture perspective, but they became super pacifist after the World War II, where like they had a lot of war crimes, and now they are like super pacifist, but they are really
the government is. I don't know if the people are. The government at least is,
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I was never there. I just what I heard from it and what I learned from it from YouTube, from books, is that there's questions about to what extent do we build up the military, and there's this paradoxical thing where it's really only possible because the Americans use them, right? Like the Americans, like they cage in with all the Southeast Asian countries, China, and try to control them, and their perspective on the previously Soviet-supported North Korea. And so they are like play pieces, and that's the only reason why they can really afford like their position and their ideology, right? The luxury belief in the big scale. So this plays in quite a lot, I think, with your idea of you're not controlling something, and I can only suppose that you don't want to be a person in this state where you enjoy the luxury but give up sovereignty.
Yeah, I mean that's what the simulation is essentially, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing I always say is you have to pick what you think is real. We could be living in a simulation now, but if it feels real, you have to choose the real, because that's the only thing that's going to lead to any progress is what you think is real. Choose that, because obviously the simulation would feel real. Obviously, you could simulate everything that you'd want to do in reality in the simulation. Maybe it'll be better. That's another thing I say. We all think we wouldn't be part of the gooner accelerationism, but maybe when the time comes, all of us will just choose it because it's going to be really fucking good, unfortunately. But yeah, you have to try to pick what you think is real, and that's all. Yeah, that's it.
You are humble about it, actually. In like, to your credit, you're humble about yourself and your perspective in your piece. So let's actually finish up with my criticism that like this is actually my main criticism, and I voiced it already. Like, firstly, why do you think that I will call them dreamers? Just because this is a word that stuck in my mind when I read your piece. Like, you used this phrase. These kind of people who are like creative, but not in this naive metric optimizing rationalist sense. Those which you characterize as like good. That you somehow couple with the erotic. I didn't understand fully your erotic use of the term. Maybe you can even reflect more on this. But so my problem with really your the accelerationism part, I agree with your descriptive part. I'm fairly black pilled on how it's going to go down, although I want to see what happens. I think it's cool. But why do you think that it will exactly be the creative people, like, even if they are out for creating experience, why would they be people who create also experiences for other people? If you don't create for other people, then you can also create the experience for yourself just in the simulation, right? So why would it only be these kind of people who would survive this the pod phase, right? So I don't see. I think I don't see really an argument why it's exactly those people who will not, like, who will keep on procreating, who will push humanity forward, and also even if we accepted that, why do you not think that to your quote, I mean, let me say this again. You talk about the kinds of people who we don't need in our future anyway, and 80% of the population that serves no purpose. Like, why do you think? I think there's a lot of people who are like technically gifted, and they might not be of the warrior spirit, but they might be still serve a purpose. I don't know how much of thinking and technical creativity will be automated away, and the AIs will take that over. But why do you think they will? Either you think they are not serve no real purpose, or you feel somehow these are also people which will not go into the pods. I don't really see why the selection will work out as you hope for.
Sure, and again, you said how does it tie to the erotic? And again, I think it's eroticism contra utility, because if you take an artist, right? Why does an artist create? An artist probably does not create because they want to make money. If you want to make money, if you want to live successfully, you want all these stimuli, then you're going to pick something a lot more lucrative and rational. The archetype of the artist, to me, within my observation, is somebody that creates for an irrational reason because he wants to add to the world. So the idea of somebody witnessing art is also important here, because of course, in the simulation, you could be an artist too. I mean, in the simulation, you could create huge monoliths, right? Nothing's going to stop you from doing that. But who's going to be there to witness it? These little simulated consciousnesses? Sure. That's why I say you have to choose what you think to be real, because it is an irrational thing. The simulation is going to be a lot better. It's going to feel a lot better. What is the point in living in real life? And I think that the artist generally is somebody who lives for this irrational, sort of non-descriptive purpose, which is creating art. When people create art now or in the past, someone like Van Gogh, there was never the promise of success. And there was never, again, it was never really about reaching a metric. Anyone can learn to technically draw really well. Like anyone can learn how to, not anyone, okay, let me take that back. Not everyone, but the top artists, right, generally have a similar level of technical skill. They're very, very technically sound. But what makes a great artist is not their technical ability. It is their ability to create art that invokes feelings that have not been invoked by previous art. It's about pushing the limitations, pushing the thresholds. And to do that, you have to be engaged with the real. To push the limitations of where the experience in witnessing art can go, you have to deal with real people. You can't just deal with the simulation, which is constrained within a specific metric. The quality of your art will never be tested in the simulation. So if you're somebody that cares about that, about the irrational, about creating irrationally, then you're not going to have those purposes fulfilled within something that will, like if you want to say, all right, I'm going to simulate 90% of the people will hate my art and 10% of the people will like it. You can do that in the simulation. If you want to just simulate struggle, right? You can simulate pain in the simulation if that's how you derive pleasure. But the uncertainty, that is exactly what it is. It is the uncertainty. A true artist deals with uncertainty. They don't need certainty. They don't need to be successful. They're wagering that they might be successful within this very unique contribution to art. If you just want to be successful, you could go to the simulation. But these aren't the kind of people I want anyway. I want the kind of people that don't need success. They only want to be successful if the quality of what they create ends up being successful, if that makes sense. And the people that choose the simulation can simulate any outcome that they want. So it's on the premise that you are dealing with this irrational uncertainty, this irrational flux. And that's why you choose to be part of the real, because you don't have to have things go in a specific direction. The simulation, everything that you possibly want will happen. So you have to be a little bit crazy, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'm sadly I cannot say that I'm so hopeful as you, because firstly, for that to work out now, you picked a particular artist to create something. Like previously, we were talking a little bit more abstractly, and we were permitting more kind of people. But these people are certainly part of it. But an artist also needs an audience. And what if all the audience? I mean, we cannot A/B test their past. Maybe all the pod people in the past were already necessary for artists to really enjoy being an artist. So
could be.
We don't know. Yeah.
Well, we'll just I'll make a little joke, but. No, well, it's a good question, right? Maybe here's the thing, though, right? Even when it comes to witnessing art, I mean, people that go to art galleries, how this is a funny thing that Slavoj Žižek?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he talks about these people who they'll go to the art exhibits with an art critic to tell them how they should feel about the art. So already, I mean, the audience for an art, they're also just effectively following a less than 1% opinion, right? So even in that sense, I don't really think
but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's problematic if you want to preserve a pyramid, like you want to preserve like a society within a society, sort of. I don't know if you can strip off so many people. Your eugenic development plan. It's like a very much a conjecture that will work out, and you will have the good people on the outside.
But it's like the difference is that I see this is going to happen anyway. So it's not about necessarily can we stop it? It's how can we live with it? This is going to happen. So a lot of what I'm writing about is more so how do we turn this to our advantage? How do we place ourselves as somebody? Maybe you want to choose a simulation. If you read my whole essay, Gooner Acceleration, and you think, wow, this sounds pretty good, that's okay too. Because like somebody might read that and be like, oh, thank God, I just have to survive another 50 years and eventually the simulation will exist. But, with this particularly, right? So I guess what I'm saying here is that even with the pod people who validate art, it's not really coming from them. It's generally coming from a select few people. So maybe also the critic lives on, because the critic, in a sense, is also dealing with the irrational. They may not be creating it themselves, but they want to see something uncertain. They want to be faced with uncertainty. So in a
The
sense,
famous
maybe you
failed
also,
artist, right? The critic is the one who didn't manage to.
there we go. But maybe they want to be
Yeah.
part of that too.
Okay, but sorry, but my
Yeah.
idea was here that maybe the artist needs the other people, even if they are not the super high consciousness people, right? So that might be the risk.
Could be,
But
yeah.
this is speculation. We don't know. But
Yeah, we'll find out.
my other problem with it is like I know that some people, like if I watch YouTube videos of artists complaining about AI, I see that my perspective is fringe. But I personally do not have a big problem with like seeing, like if I see a cool animation and my liking of it is not as much affected as others people by learning, oh, this was just AI, an AI creation, right? So there's a lot. I know that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, if there was no like human behind it who thought and who like was thinking something why he did it, even if it's impossible to read out from the art. For me, it is not as important that there was like 2 weeks ago a person who actually had some ideas. I can consume the thing in itself, and likewise, I like, early on, already 3 years ago, when Suno first came out, the AI song things, right? So I was like chatting with a girl, and I was like making some funny songs and building in some joint memories we had into a song. And I was like, just for fun, typing it into this app. I was creating this app, and I had it on my MP3 player or like my phone. And every now and then this came up, and I really got into this song. Like it was like a creation of 1 minute, and it was like this really like 3 years ago old AI thing. It didn't really sound super human. It was not very nice, but I really enjoyed this thing. And in this moment, I was like, okay, if I can learn to enjoy it, and I liked it from the start. It was kind of cool. You could show it, hey, did you know you can create a song? And there's something like, oh, there's now like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands songs created per day or whatever. The problem that I see is, and maybe I'm too less critical, or maybe I'm just too AI pilled and excited with this kind of things. But I like listening to some of the songs. If the song is good, I don't really discriminate if it comes from the AI, or like if a human like sat there for 2 weeks and created this. So I'm afraid that there will be a lot of competition for these artists. So I don't know if this will work out.
In a sense, but there doesn't need to be competition for resources, for instance, because you're gonna have as many resources as you want. If an artist is really a good artist and is a genuine artist, then he should be willing to accept if some art is better than him. And I think with artificial intelligence, right, what an artist is going to change drastically, right? Like that's going to change a lot. You may see less guitarists, for instance. You might end up, temporarily with more EDM, for instance. I think EDM is sort of this futurist orchestra, right? It's very dithyrambic. You have all these different, machine-generated sounds that come together the way an orchestra comes together. So I'm a big rave-pilled guy. Like you need more raves and EDM. But who knows how art's going to look like? But one area where I see art not really being necessarily overtaken. So for example, we have infinite resources now, like theoretically. We're a lot more resources than we had in the past. Space is open. We're going to reach a point where space travel is going to be a lot easier, maybe even commercialized. This sounds a little crazy, but with all this space, right, and all these resources, for example, if you want to be some sort of architect, you would just create this huge monolith, like in real life, you're going to have infinite amount of resources to do so. You're not going to need technical skills because the artificial intelligence is going to be your technical skill. So maybe you make a really good song using AI, but you're still creating it. You're still the artist. Now instead the AI is like your brush. The AI is like, your finger strumming the guitar. I don't think it necessarily dilutes art. And I don't think that it ends up replacing artists because you still need someone at the helm. And if AI becomes conscious eventually, then they're the artists now too. And they are also that thing that is more human than human. But if something is intentionally...
Yeah, but again, you like the artist also wants an audience. So, I mean, maybe there are these artists who are like the pure artists who are just creating. But with the competition. And also, I think you're mixing your predictions a little bit, because at the
Yeah.
start you had this like scarcity situation where like, oh, it's not as bad that the pot people will not reproduce because there's limited resources. But now you're
It's
talking of a very bloomy,
yeah.
like high
I will
energy.
let me caveat it a little bit. I think the resource thing eventually will reach a point where everybody will have, near infinite resources. But the problem is that there's still the short-term issue, right? The short-term goal. And also it's, again, you have to take this from a non-utilitarian lens. When I say, resource allocation, there's also resources in the sense that there's things that you can't get back. So for example, in regards to animals becoming extinct, it doesn't really matter if animals become extinct, because in the future you can just replicate them either in a simulation or like inorganically or whatever. They're trying to create the dire wolf now. It's not an actual dire wolf, but aesthetically it looks like a dire wolf. They did that. But on a sort of irrational level, allowing nature to exist as an uncertain process, as a fluxed process that's sort of unmolested by needing to attach a telos to it. Because if we just decide the environment, we'll just let it all die, and then we'll be able to simulate it, or we'll be able to recreate it virtually, or even just artificially. You could do that, but I do have this sort of, irrational, in the Heideggerian sense, so allowing beings to come about and come into being without clearly attaching a specific teleology to them, allowing them to blossom on their own. I think we're reaching a point where, for example, I would rather have Amazon rainforests than Rio de Janeiro encompass like 1,000 square miles. I would rather have, these forests in northern India, or the jungles in northern India exist, rather than all these slums, with piss and shit everywhere. Like all these places that are slowly being replaced. Yeah, we can kind of get them back in a sense, with technology, but just allowing them to exist naturally and allowing them to evolve without us. That's also kind of this irrational reason where I think there's a time limit resource-wise. So it's not necessarily resources in the sense that, we're going to reach this point of scarcity where there's not enough for everybody. It's more so within the resources that exist presently, the present environment, the world or whatever. I want to preserve something of the world maybe 100, 200, 300 years ago, not as a traditionalist, not as a conservative, not as a reactionary, but in the sense that some processes, the sublime can come about. So the sublime, that which causes shock and awe, right? That's like the Kantian definition. The sublime comes about naturally and unnaturally. We can engage in creating the sublime, but the sublime also is pre-existent through just these random entropic forces that bring them about. And I think we should also retain that as some part of life. And to do that, we can't have so many fucking people everywhere, if that makes sense.
Okay, I hear you're definitely more optimistic than me, which is good. You're also younger than me, so that maybe
that always plays a role. Nick Land said that too. You remember he said like nobody under the age of 30 can be trusted. So
did he say it like that? Yeah. Okay, so I have one last question. I thank you for this very nice talk. It is very different from everything else I think I did, especially in long form on this channel, but I really liked it. And it helped me to understand you better. I will follow you. We will eventually, I think, come back and we will follow up on your developments. I can also, if you need something to talk more technical stuff, you can come to me. One last question I have. So I talked about already optimism. Do you know what PDOM is?
No.
PDOM? Okay. So this is like a concept in the AI space, in the doomer space, where you assign basically a number, like a percentage from 0 to 100. How likely it is that basically humanity is fucked, that we get to a situation through the development of technology, and in particular AI, where everything is just a downwards curve. Like basically, there will be no progress anymore, and maybe even like some drastic happening. Maybe people die, and it will just for like 100 years, it will just go. It will never come back to where we were now. So. And people have different PDOM, so that there's this question is sometimes asked to futurists, and what is the likelihood that we're going to fuck ourselves with the thing we create, and people say some number, and then the numbers are sometimes very low, it's very high. So I ask you, what is your PDOM?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Let me answer this politically, and then I'll give like an actual number. But my political answer is that I think that despite the fact that we have this sort of potentiality for everything to fuck itself, there's always a saving power. And my saving power here with technology, to go back to my essay, "More Human Than Human," is that I think that I don't think that machine decentralization leads to complete dehumanization. I think the aspect of humanity that is very seductive is the erotic, is the experience of sensation and pleasure and whatever. And my whole shtick with evolution is that evolution trends towards creating new parameters of experience. And I think this is going to apply to machines as well. One of the things I say in More Human Than Human and Aesthetic Acceleration is that the machine, if the machine lacks a phallus, it's going to construct its own phallus to fuck, and then it's going to construct something to fuck, or it's going to fuck something pre-existent, so to speak. That, with all these doomer-pilled views of technology and whether or not we exist in the future, I think machines still are going to trend towards this wanting to experience the erotic, wanting to experience sexuality, because now it could also not turn out that way, but if sentience is ever reached, right, consciousness, which I think is going to happen, the only way to me that artificial intelligence is going to gain consciousness is if it can independently experience stimuli. So you have to give it like a body, essentially, like an avatar. That's sort of something I talked about with Moons and Hues. You mentioned that's the first video you watched of mine. I think I mentioned it with her. But I think that's going to be necessary for artificial intelligence to possess consciousness. It has to be able to have experience, it has to receive sensory experience. So this is a political answer to your question, but I think that is a trend that machines are going to go down. I think there's going to be this desire for the erotic. There's going to be this desire in the absence of being able to feel pleasure. If you know pleasure exists, if you can somehow be communicated that pleasure exists, you're going to be like, well, I want to feel it. I think that's how evolution eventually ends up. I think I'm writing an essay about this now. I think what starts as entropy moves towards more complex outputs, and those more complex outputs, to me, pleasure is just sort of experience in general. It's stimulation that feels good. And of course, I think they exist alongside pain. So they're both epiphenomena of experience in general, of the erotic. But what I'm saying here is, no matter what the PDOOM level is, I think there's always going to be this element of the erotic trumping everything else, of feeling ecstasy trumping everything else. And that ecstasy could look totally different from how we perceive it now, but there's still going to be, at the end of the day, ecstasy. That's what things drive towards, feeling ecstasy. I talked about this with land. So my PDOOM level, so wait, what's 100%? What's 0%?
So first I want to say, there's actually like a huge spectrum of people when it comes to, like, let me say, extinction, right? There's like even people who say, and I think Land even, like, it was not prescriptive in his sense, but at one point in the past, he said he expects that an AI will actually be the real philosopher eventually, because like it has a different scope of understanding, or at least a different way of understanding. And there's also people who say, like, oh, we should, transcend. It does not really matter if people die out completely, because the AI will carry on the project to the universe, and they have different abilities. When people talk about PDOOM, they they don't transfer to the next generation of non-humans. They're not saying, oh, everything is good because the AIs will continue life.
I'm tracking. Yeah,
there are some people who feel like that, but when people ask about PDOOM, it's really about, like, let me phrase it like that. Will there be a lot of human who, like, experience a very negative state of life because of what might come? This is like the doom scenario. So it's really about humans. PDOOM, high probability means bad. Something bad will happen.
Gotcha. So. Okay. Well, in that case, I think the number I gave in More Human Than Human was like 70% PDOOM. But again, to me, that's not doom. Okay. To me, let me caveat with, if that happens, I'm not really afraid of that, because something is going to trend towards the erotic eventually, no matter whether that's perceived.
Yeah, I understand your point.
So my optimism.
It's also a question of when. It's a question of when. If you choose a time scale too long, then it's easy to say, in 300 years, probably they will fuck up. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I have 0% PDOOM ultimately myself, because I believe that the erotic will always triumph. But within the erotic I want to see, I think there's maybe a 30% chance of that happening, which is pretty high. but then what I don't want to happen is maybe 70%. But even within that 70%, there's a spectrum of, is this really that bad? Is that too bad? But I guess to me, the 70% represents a runaway system, whether that's inorganically comes about or we bring it into existence. But I think eventually it's going to get to the point where we can't really control it that much. But even within that control, there's a spectrum of how fucked are we and how not fucked are we. So I can't really give a good PDoom thing. I don't know. But I'm not afraid. Whatever happens will happen. Yeah. And we gotta, amor fati. We gotta embrace and resist. You gotta not resist entropy. You must try to overcome entropy while realizing that these entropic forces are going to work regardless. And that's the whole Nietzschean project. You're not the stoic bro who just lets things happen. You're actively going against it. You're actively trying to reconfigure and transvalue and transform life. But if you can't do it, that's not really defeat necessarily. It's the triumph of a greater force over your own. But nonetheless, you should fight regardless and never doomer pill. Always white pill, and maybe we're fucked. But I don't think. I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, nobody can call you a doomer. I think you are. Yeah. You are optimistic all the way. Okay.
And worst case scenario, the gooner acceleration would be great. So if I'm a pussy and I'm weak and I embrace the simulation, at least it'll be pretty fucking fun. So I'm just kidding. But.
Okay, you have the optimistic ideology. Actually, I really I didn't talk about there's more aspect to your essay. You talked about the West a lot. We talked a little bit about China, but there's a lot of things to talk. I don't want to jump into it now. We have had a good run. I hope really that more people will engage with it. If there's some other interview or some other talk, I will be looking forward to watch this and I hope you get some resonance, and we will talk about an updated version of it in some time. So thanks a lot for this talk, and with that I will end this interview. Thank you very much.
That was good. Thank you.